Good evening, everyone. We will call the meeting of the Spencer Finance Committee, February 23rd, 2016, to order. It is 7:03 p.m. and I want to explain to the folks watching that we don't have anyone from Spencer Cable Access tonight. The camera is set up and running, and we thank Selectman Pepe for actually turning the recording on. So we will do our best. You should be able to get all of the audio. The video will be a wide shot, and that's all there is. I also should let you know that there is a school committee meeting this evening that Spencer Cable Access had intended to tape. We just got word that the young fellow who was taping it had a death in the family, and so there will be no recording of the school committee meeting for February 23rd. All right, so first item on the agenda, the minutes of the January 26th, 2016 meeting that were emailed to you. Could you pass that down to me, please? Oh, you did. So the minutes were emailed, and I'm sure everyone had a chance to review them. I would entertain a motion regarding them.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay. Any corrections, additions, etc.? All in favor of accepting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Correspondence. So we have in our packets, in our handouts tonight, I have from Laura Torty the summary of the conflict of interest law and the acknowledgement receipt, which you all have copies of and you've all signed, and so we'll put those back, give those back to Laura. It just simply acknowledges that you got a copy of the handout. And also the hard copies of the BayPath budget. Those came in the mail last week, and I asked the business administrator from BayPath to send me a soft copy, so you all have soft copies as well as the hard copies that you have tonight. And so that is the correspondence that we have. I did also email you what came from the Suburban Coalition regarding the Chapter 70 funding. There are a couple bills before the legislature that want to change the Chapter 70 funding formulas, foundation budget descriptions, and things like that. Excuse me. We'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting, but I forwarded you the email, so you have the text of the laws and the changes that are being made, and I'm putting together a doc that shows what the law just refers to, that it wants to change certain things. I'm putting together a doc that shows the existing wording as it is now, so it's all in one place, so we can look at it. So but that's for the next meeting. All right, liaison reports, Financial Management Planning Committee.
I'm gonna let Adam answer that one.
Sure. The next meeting with the Financial Management Planning Committee is going to be a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen. I mentioned this last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting that our next comprehensive roads project presentation is scheduled for Monday, February 29th at 6 p.m. So the FMPC will be there. And again, myself, Steve Tyler, our Utilities and Facilities Superintendent, and then Bill Scarpati from FST will run through some of the, we'll repeat some of the stuff that we presented last time, so people who haven't had a chance to see some of the information that we're putting out there for people to give us feedback on, and then we'll have also several different scenarios to discuss that night as well.
So the funding scenarios, and you can go into those in as much or as little detail as you want, but you're looking at those funding scenarios for this town meeting cycle.
So yes, we are
Okay.
proposing the FMPC. I expect the FMPC will make an advisory recommendation to the Board of Selectmen based on the feedback that we received from the public through these hearings of one of the three different funding scenarios or a different one. I expect they to make a recommendation that would then require, one, a town meeting vote to authorize borrowing, to incorporate appropriations into the budget, and then also to put a question on the ballot. So I think that's the direction we're heading, and all the information that we're presenting is based on that path. So it just remains to be seen which direction we go in, what everyone feels comfortable with, a request from the voters.
Okay, but you're not looking, I mean, you're looking at this,
May.
at May, yeah.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure we were clear, it wasn't.
This 29th meeting is still a public.
It's a
open
public
meeting.
hearing, yep,
Yeah.
advertised, yep,
So
exactly.
it's a public hearing, that means everyone can come and speak.
Correct.
So we really, it's really
Encourage it.
important that everyone out there who has questions, show up and ask your questions to the people who actually have the answers for them. Capital Planning Committee, you're still meeting.
Well, yes, we met February 2nd, and that was just mainly informational to let us know that there's $1.4 million projects that amount to 1.4 million, requested by, between the fire department, highway department, library, parks and rec, police, sewer, town clerk and town hall. So we'll hear it's next week,
March 1st.
March 1st, all the committees, we're gonna listen to all of them and listen to the requests then.
And March 1st is Election Day here.
And so we're gonna
So
be at the
you're gonna be
library.
at the library.
Yeah.
All right, Spencer's Brookfield School, anybody willing to step up and be the liaison to the schools? To essentially, it's either go to the meetings or pay, or watch them on TV to fill us in on what's going on. I mean, right, unfortunately, there's one tonight that none of us can be at because we're here. I mean, I'll try and go to as many as I can, but we'll see. It'll still be important, so let me put it this way. Anyone who feels that they can show up at one, just let me know, so that I won't have to go if nobody else can go. Does that work? All right, and the DPHS Building Committee, we need a representative for that. That's, in the nature of building committees, is an ebb and flow of heavy lifting and nothing. That's just how building committees work. There are times of very, very, very intense activity, and times when you just sit and wait for somebody else's deadline or a process or somebody else to do another piece of the job. You're not leaping at it
Oh,
again.
I'm sorry. This is the second time you tried it?
Yeah. All right, I'll do that because,
Maybe, how about the two new people that come in, the 10th and 11th person on the
Okay,
finance
all right.
committee? We'll
all
tell
right,
them
I'll
that
do it till we get a 10th and 11th. I'll let Kevin Hicks know, he had sent me a letter, and I will let him know.
we're still waiting.
What I forgot to put down here, sorry, I just forgot to type it in, but I have it handwritten, is the Building and Property Reuse Advisory Committee. Chris, nothing yet?
We haven't started yet.
No, not yet.
We are working with an architect to try and get information on some of the buildings. So that review is underway, and then when those pieces are complete, then the committee will be able to sit down.
So when you say you're working with an architect,
So most importantly, the main building we're starting with is Lake Street School. Because now that we own it, there's costs associated with maintaining it. And the Board of Selectmen took that up last night, that there's a concern of how much money you keep spending on a vacant building in terms of heating and utilities, so. In addition to that, we expect this committee would develop an RFP, put it out there, advertise it, market it, try to get different industries involved. But as part of that RFP, what we'd like to do is have a buildings needs analysis in terms of the condition of the building, and have that, as much information as we have available, as an attachment to the RFP. So that process is starting now. And we also advertise in the newspaper. We have a couple open positions or vacancies on that committee, so if people are interested in the Building Reuse Committee, please contact my office. And so we expect the next 30 days or so that we hopefully get the committee going.
so the architect looks at the mechanicals, looks at
Correct.
the structural and
Exactly,
all that kind of stuff.
exactly.
Okay, excellent, good, thanks. Did I miss anything? Are there any new committees I don't know about yet?
Landfill solar, is someone on this committee?
Oh, landfill, Robin, sorry.
So, same
I'll
thing,
put that
so,
on.
same thing, we advertise in the paper for members, so we still have a couple vacancies there as well.
Okay,
And Mr. Tyler and myself have reached out to several companies that would have assisted these types of committees through the RFP process. We're not looking to design anything ourselves, as much as we are looking to put it out there to development companies that they can do a project on our land. and then negotiate a lease with them. So we're looking at consultants that have done this with other towns, getting proposals from them, such that they could guide this committee, so.
What other towns have done it?
There's
Lot-
solar's
lot of
everywhere in
towns.
Massachusetts,
Yeah.
Pick a town.
Well, oh,
There's
okay,
something.
I mean, I
Oh, in
know,
terms of,
like the state's got those solar panels down on the.
the one I can think of right now is
like-
Brookfield is one.
Oh.
Brookfield, there's a big one over on
I know.
Stafford Street in Leicester.
Yeah, but I'm
Oh,
thinking mainly on the
No,
landfill, but I agree with,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's obviously array everywhere, but in terms of landfill development, town landfill development, I don't wanna say the wrong town, but something either Long Meadow, Wilbraham, somewhere out there, but Brookfield definitely. So we have a couple of examples of RFPs that they've used, but having someone to help the committee that's never done that before, and then negotiate a lease agreement. We've set aside some money at the fall town meeting last fall to help with that committee, so things going on.
Okay, and they will be in print for the next meeting in 2 weeks. Okay, so we're finished with liaison reports. Let's move on to the FY 2017 budget overview, what we've been waiting for with the.
Yep. Okay, so you have a packet, 10 to 15 pages or so. I'm gonna focus on the first 5. I made the same presentation or discussion last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. I have a cover memo, and
Excuse me, I
then,
just want to say one, and I emailed it to everybody, so they
Okay.
have soft copies as
Great.
well. Okay.
and then the calendar, which we can touch on before we go tonight, but also I see it on the agenda. And then the last 7 pages or so are the spreadsheets that I use to obviously draft the memo, and we can use that as backup if anyone has any questions. So I'm gonna start off, as we always do, we start off with our revenue structure. We, as a town, don't have the luxury of finding new revenues on an annual basis and increasing revenues on an annual basis. So if we're gonna develop our funding expense schedule, it needs to be tied to realistic revenues. So there are 3 main types of revenues, the first being tax levy, the second being local aid or state aid, and the third is local receipts. As far as the tax levy goes, as everybody knows, we're restricted by Proposition 2.5. So we know, this is one of the definites that we know in terms of our revenue. The 2.5 increase over last year's levy limit is about $306,000. We're allowed to allocate an estimate for new growth. New growth is any tax revenue that's come on the books in FY16 that obviously wasn't as part of the tax rate last 2 falls ago, or this past fall I should say, which we'll now be able to incorporate in the FY 2017 budget, so we're gonna estimate that. And then after the summer, we submit values to Department of Revenue and they will certify, so in the fall town meeting, we'll revise that number. The $90,000 represents about a 5-year average. That is an estimate. We do know that our debt exclusions are gonna change slightly. I've listed them for you below, so you have a reminder of which ones there are and what we have left. The ladder truck and Sibley Farm purchase, we're going into the last years of those 2 purchases. Town Hall renovations expires in 2021, Wire Village School 2024, and then Bay Path in 44. So the adjustment, the $16,000 is not necessarily a net loss in revenue because it's tied to the debt payment in the budget. So decreased revenue matches up with the decreased expense, okay?
And you said that the 41 is the end of the year when you were estimating before you actually set the tax rate? Is that the money,
41.
the 4166?
So the $4,000, what we do is, so if you go to our pro forma page, it's the very first page after the calendar, you'll see our total levy is $13,427,000, and there's a 0 above that. So last year, what we did was, in order to make the tax rate even at, say, $13.57, we used a $4,000 decrease, so we decreased that from the 13 and change, so that we had an even tax rate, 13.57, rather than having a tax rate of say 13.57186, right? So we just use that little bit of number to just adjust it slightly so there's an even tax rate, and we do show that on. I have to show that on the recap for the Department of Revenue. So it's a small number, and obviously a $13 million levy, but overall, the expected increase in tax levy is about $384,000. Okay, any questions on levy? This top of page 2, the governor's budget, which came out in January 27th, he proposed an increase in unrestricted general government aid in the amount of $89,000. That 4.3% is not arbitrary, it's tied to the expected increase in revenues for the state. So what he's trying to do is match that up as essentially a revenue sharing situation. As their revenues go up, then they would release those back to us, and the same percentage wise. And all the other items in state aid accounts at this point have been level funded. Those are veterans reimbursement, library offsets, pilots for state-owned land, etc. That's the cherry sheet or the local aid estimate. Still has to go through the budget, obviously, still has to go through the House. They're getting ready to go through their process now, and then the Senate will have their opportunity, and then joint committee late in our fiscal year, and hopefully the governor signs a budget near July 1, and then we'll account for any changes in the fall, as we typically do. Local estimated receipts, that is revenue that we get from excise tax, permits, fees, fines, investment income, or any miscellaneous revenue. We level fund that every year, knowing that those numbers could fluctuate. The one thing I did do was add a $10,000 increase to the fees in Otis. That's because the Board of Selectmen voted several months ago to change the fee structure for the building permit fees. So based on that estimated change in rate fees, we have an estimated increase in income through the revenue, very small amount, but it is noted in local estimated receipts. If you note, the next item is available fund transfers. This is where we will transfer funds from different accounts to balance the budget. Last fall, we used $31,000 in free cash because we had several one-time items that we felt we could use $31,000 in free cash. That was mostly in the police department. We had promotional processes to undertake. We had some retirements, so some additional overtime, costs of both dispatch and with patrolmen. We used that money. That's not being proposed yet, any free cash, so I'm taking that off of available revenue. And then one thing that's a real killer for us this year is the last several years we've been using money from overlay surplus to help our budget. Overlay surplus is the amount that's left over from your reserve that you've set aside for abatements. So if we have $13.4 million estimated in tax levy, we start going through the year and someone applies for an abatement, and if they get a $5,000 decrease in their taxes, we don't take that off of the tax levy because we've already certified that as the rate. What we do is we set up a reserve for about $100,000 each year that we would then take $5,000 out of, and that way our levy stays whole, okay? That's the abatement reserve. So any money that's left over at the end of the fiscal year in that abatement reserve becomes what they call overlay surplus. You're allowed to build it up from year to year. We had about $400,000 in there going back 3 or 4 years, and we used that money to apply to the budget to help pay for things like the senior work program, tax title, things tied to the tax rate. And unfortunately that money's dried up. There's no more money in that reserve. The good news is we were able to have that money such that we were, we had $500,000 in cuts a couple of years ago. If we didn't use this money, we would have had $600,000 in cuts. And if we didn't do the meals tax, we would have had $700,000 in cuts. So we've tried to use whatever we can over the past several years to try and maintain what we have. Unfortunately, that's been the environment for us the last 3 or 4 years anyway, in which we know that our revenue structure combined with our additional expenses coming from certain fixed costs and assessments, education assessments, that it's been a real challenge to maintain what we have, and unfortunately that reserve is dried up, and that's going to unfortunately come off of the top of available revenue that we had last year. So in comparison to last year, you can see at the bottom of page 2, we have the new levy estimated increase of $384, the local aid of $89 that I mentioned, which is the 4.3% from the governor, the local receipt increase of modest $10,000 tied to building permit fees, minus the $31 in free cash, minus the $99 in overlay, and minus $11,000 in indirect reimbursement. Indirect reimbursement is the money that the water and sewer enterprise funds pay the town back for fringe benefits that we're paying for them up front. So we include in our employee benefits budget, in the general government operating budget, the payments for health insurance and other things tied to employees in the enterprise fund, and then they reimburse us. So it's essentially it's a revenue source, but it's obviously tied to a direct expense. Because our overall budget is going down, they pay a percentage they pay money to us based on the percentage of the budget that their budget represents. They pay us for accounting, we do all the accounting for them, we do all the tax collections for them, we do IT for them, we do insurance for them. So as we've made cutbacks in certain areas, in addition, their budget is less than what it was last year. That results in an $11,000 reduction in indirect reimbursement from them. I have a whole page and formula. I don't have it with me tonight that I can show you on that, but their reimbursements to us is less this year. It's tied, also connected to their expense budget, but at the end of the day, on the revenue side, it's an $11,000 reduction. So the net new revenue for FY17 expected is $343,000. Okay? So if I look at that page, the pro forma page, 20,882,000, 343 of that is new as compared to what it was last year. So it's not very much money relative to what our budget is going to be my first segue. Segueing into expenses on page 3 of my memo. So as you know, our budget season starts at the end of November. The selectmen set goals. I issue budget packages to department heads. They spend the month of December preparing budget requests, capital requests, submit those in January. And then based on our revenue structure, based on known education minimum local increases, which have been distributed, made available by the Department of Education, and any fixed cost increases that I'm aware of, and I'll mention those on the bottom of page 3, based on any surplus or deficit, I then adjust department heads' budgets. So in this case, in this year, we had a $288,000 deficit after I received all of their budgets, based on our modest revenue increase, based on our increases in our fixed costs such as health insurance and pension, and based on the minimum local contributions for the schools, and I'll show you the impacts of that in a second. But at the end of the day, after I made $288,000 in cuts in our budget, it resulted in a $30,000 increase in general government over last year. That's only a 0.35% increase to the general government side of the budget. So 8.7 million, 16,000 last year, 8.7 million, 46,000 this year, only represents a $30,000 increase. You can see half of the items on the right are less than what we spent last year, and several are increases. Obviously, the major one is line item 800, which is employee benefits. But again, that's a very modest budget on the general government side of 30,000. This budget incorporates, based on the bullet points at the bottom, a 2% increase for all personnel. That's based on, we're going into our 3rd year of negotiated contracts for all of our union personnel and personnel bylaw people. We have a known 8% increase in our Worcester County Regional Retirement Assessment. That's shown up in line item 800. And I budgeted, doing this a couple weeks ago before I left for vacation, an 8% increase for health insurance. Unfortunately, I found out yesterday that our increase is actually going to be 12.8% or 13%, which is going to result in another $35,000 setback that I have to go into the budget and make reductions. On page 4, you can see all of the line items that I cut the $288,000 out of. Everything from Board of Selectmen's newsletter expense account, printing expenses, attorney's fees, reserves for legal expenses and tax title, some cleaning reserves in town hall maintenance. I took the $40,000 police cruiser out of the operating budget, which we put in, knowing that we were requesting that every year. That's now got to go back in the capital plan and be competitively reviewed and taken out of that pool of money. I had originally planned for, now we have to rehire the town planner position. I had originally budgeted a step 5 going back to step one, and then if I hire someone with experience, I'll have to add money in the fall. Highway department, we took out any capital money that was reserved for dam repairs. I left in money for engineering, but any repairs will now have to come out, and same thing with stormwater management or drainage repairs, will have to come out of the capital plan instead. I had a modest increase in snow and ice. As you know, we try to every year bump that up, so that leaves us with a more available free cash in the spring. Last night, the Board of Selectmen voted to transfer $100,000 into the snow and ice budget, which comes directly off of our available free cash. I think we have about $650 left. So now, after last night, we only have $550 left. So the more we can increase snow and ice on an annual basis in the operating budget, that will help us and make that money available for capital. I had to reduce that from 20,000 to 10,000. Transfer station, I eliminated an unfilled monitor position that we have, and then so on and so on. Okay. The known killer that we have every year, until the town meets its target share based on the Department of Education's requirements for how much the town has to contribute towards its education budget. This year, the minimum local contribution rate is $351,000. So as I showed you, our new revenue this year is only $343,000. So just the minimum local contribution increase for Spencer East Brookfield and for Bay Path is $8,000 more than we have in our total revenue, new revenue next year. Never mind factoring anything in general government like our increases in health insurance, retirement, any utility costs, any contract raises. So that's why I had to decrease 288. Automatically going into it, we had to make reductions based on the fact that education alone was more than our available revenue. That's a trend that's just, we're unable to keep up with, and we keep going backwards. And that's before the districts give us anything for new transportation costs, before they give us anything for any additional local requests, or any cost above the minimum that they could and most likely will make. Again, this is only the minimum, and the minimum is more than what we have. And that's all summarized on the bottom of page 5. So again, $343,000 in new revenue in FY17, a summary of how that was calculated, and then the initial budget proposing a $30,000. So we have a 0.35% increase in general government, a 3.51% increase in education. That's $349,000 in new expenditures. There's a $2,000 difference only because of out-of-district reimbursement. The difference between the additional revenues and the additional expenses, after I eliminated $288,000 in items in the general government budget, was a $6,800 number that I then decreased out of the abatement reserve, which is something I mentioned in the beginning about overlay. So if you look on my pro forma on page 2, you'll see on the very bottom, you'll see item C, allowance for abatements and exemptions, $100,000. That number was 106 and 82, I think it was. And so I just rounded that down to 100,000. That's how I got a balanced budget. So this budget, as you see it today, the revenues are $20,882,000 and the expenses are $20,882,000. Although I do have the bad news again about the insurance. I have a $34,000 deficit right now. It's not shown on here. And then I expect to have a higher deficit once the education assessment comes in from Spencer East Brookfield. We do have a preliminary one from Bay Path, which you saw. So again, I think what people need to understand in terms of the education budget and the reason for the minimum local increase, there's a known factor every year that the minimum foundation budget is going to go up strictly from inflation, costs. There's a formula. It's going to go up a certain percent. Even if it goes up 2.5%, let's say. On top of that, what is really hurting us is the state is pushing us to increase the amount of our share relative to their share. So if, let's say that they were at one time paying 75% of education through Chapter 70, and then we were only paying 25%, they're looking to completely reverse that to 75 us, 25 them. So until we get to that number, we're gonna pay another multiplier factor on top of the minimum, say 2.5% increase every year. So I think last year,
Well, this is
FY15.
FY '93 to FY '15 from the DESI website, and the red shows what the state chapter 78. This darker one shows the foundation budget. Then the dotted black line shows the required net school spending. And the blue line with the square shows the actual. So we've always been above actual, but when you look at
the grade line.
the grade lines
The
and then the purple lines, and you see how,
It's all a
They
blur
have-
from here.
Yeah.
so.
and the purple,
I'm
the
a foot away, I
darker,
couldn't tell what color it was.
the darker, it's actually cross hatch. The darker lines have increased disproportionately to the red lines, okay? And then the dotted line just consistently goes up as well.
Yeah.
So the red lines are what the state gives us.
I think what people need to also understand is the same thing with us in terms of our local aid. Chapter 70, which is the state aid for schools, FY15 here, and even this year in FY17, that amount is lower than what it was in 2008,
Right.
2009.
So this isn't actual money, this is just
So
relationships?
even though our gray bars are going up and we're seeing 10 to 15% increases in fringe benefits and health insurance and retirement costs, the revenues that are staying flat or just are flat to where they were 5 years ago or more, and our costs have gone this, and we just can't keep up. And we're no different than a lot of other towns in central Mass.
You can go onto the DESI website and
Right.
create this for any district, any school in the state.
So again, the state of the state, and unfortunately, the department heads and I realize that every year, we're just looking to maintain what we have. And unfortunately, again, our revenues aren't what they were 7 years ago. Our costs are exponentially have increased. And in addition to that, we have, certain mandates that we came across, like the $700,000 increase to Spencer East Brookfield a couple years ago. All that's added up to a major problem for us. So then that's some of the reasons why we've asked for overrides in past years, is because we can't keep up with less revenue, higher costs. The only way to maintain what we have then is obviously to increase revenue, and the only way we can do that is increase the levy. When the levy's not increased, we decrease costs, decrease services, and that's unfortunately the trend that we've had the last several years.
But are we getting to the point now that we cannot even maintain what we had, that we're gonna?
Well, you saw it, we
continue to
reduced
lose?
$288,000,
Right.
and these are not things that were added on and then taken away. The only such thing I can see that was done, for example, is snow and ice. I added money, and then I took it away.
Snow and ice is,
Knowing that it's a policy, unwritten policy that we have to increase that number.
Yeah.
But pretty much everything else is removing something that was in the budget last year.
and there's nothing in here that allows for more hours at town hall or the library as well,
Correct.
correct?
The only thing we've made an adjustment in hours is adding 4.5 hours to the building inspector's hours from 19.5 to 24. Keep in mind that several years ago, we had a 40-hour-a-week position and a 19.5-hour position. So total of almost 60 hours, we're, by adding this, we're only back to 24.
And I understand just from having to go and get a permit for something, that they're very far, that they're behind on their inspections, and it's costing contractors and people who need the
Yep.
inspections because it's time, is that correct?
Correct, we
More
had
time?
many conversations with developers, builders, owners. The building inspector only works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, part-time. So if you call Thursday, Friday, obviously, we're waiting till Monday. So that is a problem. Decreased administrative support is a problem in terms of filing permits, getting them out, processing permits. So it's there's a lot of different variables that are impacted here in terms of operations.
And then, just at the state level with the library budget, the library gets a lot of support from the state, every library in the Commonwealth does, and a lot of the things that you can log on to and get free, all the databases with the back issues of magazines and all kinds of things like that, and it in the Board of Library Commissioners' budget, request is being reduced as well. So that, sort of the snowball effect for everybody is that we'll lose those services, some of those, at the state level, in addition to what we're losing at the town level. So there's a lot, there are a lot of snowball effects, residual effects. And the legislators last night didn't seem to, the corners of their mouths weren't turned up, I'll tell you. They seem to be pretty concerned that the governor, that not much is gonna change with Chapter 70 because the governor is focusing on the opioid crisis and DCF, two critical issues as well. So everybody's kind of in limbo right now, it seems as if, or sliding backwards.
The chapter 70 proposed for Spencer East Brookfield, I think, was flat, maybe a $21,000 increase.
It was, yeah, it was,
And a $13.5 million budget.
yeah, it was statistically insignificant, as they say. So that's,
And Madam Chairman, we also heard that, that committee that met, which Adam was a part of, to look at Chapter 70, had a load of findings, but not, the one that wasn't touched was the calculation, and the other changes are gonna take years to implement, so we're not looking at
so,
changes there.
the legislation, that's what I said earlier, I had sent everyone just the memo from the coalition of suburban coalition that had the text of the legislation that's been proposed to make some adjustments to the foundation budget, to the foundation budget formula, and that's what I am, I'm gonna, at the next meeting, we're gonna talk about it on this committee, and I'm going to send, and I'll send it to Adam so you can have it as well. I started today looking at the original wording, because the legislation says, amend section such and so by striking this word and adding a paragraph, and you have to see the whole thing to do the context. So I've gone back and taken the original, and I'll put that doc together, and you can all see what it is that there, but it's not about really, it's about looking at the foundation budget, not about the funding at all, so. And it's there for what that's worth. But they did send, they are asking boards and committees to sign a resolution to send to the legislators to ask them to please at least work on that. Don't let it languish in committee, please at least begin to deal with that. Because this 1973, the formulas have not changed since 1973. So.
It's a perfect storm. Our two needs are what we thought we'd get relief from in the past on our Chapter 70 and Chapter 90.
Yep.
State funds.
Yep.
And they're level funding us on 70 and
90.
90.
90.
That's a different, but then they have not backed off on requirements. They have not said, well, we can't afford to give you such and such, so we'll let you have a pass this year. You still have to follow all the regs and meet all the mandates that they keep putting forth. Let me ask you this, I don't know if this is the time or not. The $5,000 for the Lake Street closing, have you thought about where that money might come from? But for this year, that would be this year's budget though, right? If you're gonna close up, last night with the selectmen voted to do to drain the pipes and everything at Lake Street, is that in the
Oh.
next year or this year?
No, so that's an additional expense.
Yep.
So that'll have to come out of free cash. So what'll
Oh,
happen
okay,
is,
all right.
just like snow and ice, we have additional, but as long as I budget the balance of budget before June 30th.
Yep.
So, for example, town hall maintenance, we keep 70 grand in there, cleaning, oil, miscellaneous expenses, repairs, etc. So if I tie it to that account and end up spending 75,000, then I'll have to, before June 30th, add 5,000 out of free cash. So the first article at town meeting always is balancing the current year.
Right, so that's where that,
It's gonna have to, it's not budgeted.
right, sometimes you come
So
to the finance committee.
we've already gone
reserve
through the
account.
money we reserved for all heating, which is
Yeah,
what we talked about
right.
last night.
But
It's just-
then, do we still have any money, but the finance committee reserve account?
It's only 5,000, but
Well, I know, but that number resonated with me
what I like
last
to use
night.
that for is in case something comes up between Maytown meeting and June 30th.
Right, oh, I know that, but
So-
that's why I just,
It used to be
Second.
as high as 25,000, I think, at one point. It was 5.
And Madam Chairman, FYI, we went through Lake Street and we decided to do this because that building is burning 100 gallons of oil a day. So, you know, the 4,000 will be, 4,000, 5,000, maybe 6,000 will be well spent to keep us from
Oh.
heating that thing through April, so.
and, yeah, and the consequences of frozen
And
pipes
Lot
or
next year too, I mean,
anything
Yeah.
like that, right.
if we have to. which
Right, right,
I'm
right.
sure we will.
We're just looking short term to get,
All right, any other questions about the budget? I thought
This
it
whole
was.
budget doesn't take into consideration any additional funding that the school may come back at you for, above and beyond what was asked for last year.
And Bay Path's letter was less, I don't know, I don't wanna say less positive, but they seem to be needing a little more money than they have in the past as well, so,
And they're-
and some of it's tied to the state.
So Bay Path's annual assessment went up 10.5%. A part of that is due to obviously, it's kids going from one district to another district, within our district, if you will.
Well, part of it is
I
the
think
number of kids that go.
their
right.
operating assessment went up,
Yeah,
and then their transportation assessment went down. So that could have been higher.
right, and also, the buy-in for Bay Path, however, does, our buy-in, what do we have, one more year? Is this the last year or next
I
year?
believe this is.
This is the last,
Like 9 to 10,
this is ninth, okay, so we have this year and next year,
looks like it.
Yep,
yeah. I
so
just
one more
didn't
year,
remember
FY
if it
18
was-
will be the last year.
Okay, I just didn't remember if we had, if this was 7, but it's, 8, but it's 9, so,
I just thought of something, one of the things that we should factor in is, in terms of calculating, we talked about the roads project and an override for that, obviously is needed, but, without that, I think people would see a decrease in their tax rate because of the 2 debt exclusions coming off FY 17. The ladder truck, is 154,000 and Sibley's another 142. So that's $272,000 coming off of the levy.
so the last bill for that is
So I need to factor that in.
FY 17, right? So,
it's not all bad.
It's not all bad news.
It's not all
Yeah.
bad news, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
No, but if the school or somebody comes back at you for more money, that's at least someplace that,
Well, that's not available because it's tied, what it is, it's tied to the debt payment.
yeah, those are debt exclusions.
So what I'm saying is that we are making a debt, we have a debt payment, so the $272,000 expense that we have, more than that, 154, almost 300,000. So about, say, $300,000 in expense that's tied to an increase in the levy limit. So by that expense going away, the levy
That goes
goes
away.
down. So everything being equal, the people would see a decrease in their tax rate, right? Because the tax levy is gonna be would be $300,000 less, not factoring in Proposition 2.5 and et cetera, but, so therefore, any increase that we have in terms of an override for roads, we need to factor in that we should factor in that calculation, that something's coming off as something's going on.
Yeah,
It's replacing it, and we're proposing some amount, which could be equal to that or more. So if it was equal to that, obviously the people wouldn't see an increase in their tax rate,
Yep.
everything being equal. And if it's above that, it's not gonna be as much because we have $300,000 coming off of the levy.
Well, you could sell that as a.
It's a positive.
That's positive affordability for per household. But Paul, we're gonna get money hit from the schools, there's no doubt about it. We just, the catch-22 on working hard to get settled a new contract as well, that's gonna hit us as well. So, they needed to have a contract, but the back end is that we'll see it in our, as additional increase.
All All right, so any other questions about the,
Just out of curiosity, Adam, on the increase in the health insurance, you guys typically, go out and shop around the
Absolutely.
companies, and this is still
Yep.
the least expensive, but it's still gonna go up by.
What I'm being told is that, just on the top, the inflation for health insurance is about 9% per year automatically. And then we have an additional cost tied to the Affordable Care Act, which is about another 2.5, so automatically 11.5. And then that 1.3 is tied to our claim history. So the majority of that increase is out of your control. It's just, so we do an RFP, we draft it in the fall. So, we go through it, and actually what we do is, we actually go through a joint purchasing arrangement with other towns in Massachusetts called MIA, Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association. School districts, towns, etc. And then we also get quotes from all of the others, the Harvard Pilgrims, the Tufts, and everybody else. So, that's what we have. So we're actually gonna be discussing some of the options that the state has given us in terms of addressing health insurance costs with employees, and I'll bring that up at the next selectmen's meeting.
all right. Did you have anything else? I have any other under town administrator, so did you have anything else?
Just a reminder about the roads project presentation on Monday. And then we'll be back here on March 8th, beginning our series of staff department presentations, the 8th, 22nd, and the 29th of March. Public hearing will be on April 12th. Not to steal your thunder on the schedule, but
Steal away.
that's what we have coming up.
Don't forget that March 1st is an election,
March 1st is an election.
right? That's next Tuesday.
Primary,
And all voting in Spencer takes place here at Town Hall. And the only other thing I have, so if everyone's okay with the budget, the only other thing I have under any other, on my part of the any other agenda is there any interest or possibility to meet on those other days, the 8th, the 22nd, the 29th, at earlier than 7 p.m.? I know some of you work and you can't get in 7's when you can get here. So I just didn't know if anyone would, if you wanted to consider 6 or 6:30. Just asking, just throwing it out there.
Well, on the 8th, I'm gonna be here at 5:30 anyway.
Well, I brought this up to Mary only because we have, the example, the 29th, where you have Bay Path coming in, Spencer East Brookfield coming in, and I've added accounting, board assessors, and treasurer, which you haven't had in the past, but I figured it'd be good to have an understanding of how those offices spend or allocate their funds. So, you could be a 2-hour, 3-hour meeting, and you could be here till 10, and I suggested you want to start earlier than that, at 6, so you're not here that late. But it's up to folks when they can get here. I know the selectmen moved their meetings to 6, so we did our capital at 5:30. But if people can't get here to 7, we'll keep it at 7. It's just an option that's out there if people want to meet earlier, because you could be dealing with some long nights. So if you're working, early in the morning till 10 at night, you're talking a 14, 15-hour day.
And this is late right now.
Can't believe you're still awake.
I know it.
Come
You
on,
can meet at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm here, so.
come on, Nancy, you're a veteran, you've done the 11, 12.
I know,
Yeah. Had a few of
6
those.
o'clock, if that is.
I'll be late if it's 6 o'clock, but not significantly.
Okay.
6:30 better?
6:30? All right,
Maybe 6:30, even if it's a half
All right.
hour, it's a half hour on the back end,
Okay.
is what I'm thinking.
all right.
And then what I could do is on like the 29th, I could put the staff from 6:30 to 7, and then have the schools 7 o'clock on, and we can get them out
And
of
then
here.
when you get here, okay, so we'll do,
You'll remind us anyway,
yes. I have you all on speed dial, on speed email.
One button.
All right, so for the 8th and the 22nd, we'll make it 6 p.m. And when I post it, and then, I'm sorry, we'll make it 6:30 p.m. And for the 29th, we'll make it 6 p.m. I think we'll leave, I don't know, leaving the 12th, the public hearing,
Yeah,
I
that's
prefer to leave that at 7, I
That's fine.
think more,
It'll just be me, so.
and not, I was about to say, that the public who works, who,
That's not what I meant.
Oh, wait a minute, hey, is
That's
that
not what you
gonna work?
I didn't mean that the only one that would be here other than you would be me. I didn't mean that. What I meant was, there won't be any other staff here that night. But I expect public to
We
show.
Now,
up.
There's more
capital,
truth in what you said than.
capital improvement will be done.
You're done next, you're done on the 8th.
Right, but we're meeting at 5:30, but you think
He'll
we'll
be
be in and
done.
out of here?
Yeah,
Okay.
just,
By
just
6:30.
a rank,
Well,
I'll have all the
yeah,
tabulation, you walk in
yeah.
and it's a quick discussion and go.
Okay, can
Okay.
you just recap the times for the
Sure.
next 3 meetings again?
March 8th, 6:30, March 22nd, 6:30, March 29th, 6.
I thought you had it the other way around. Am I right?
No, March 8th, March 22nd, 6:30, March 29th, 6.
I'm good.
Hello?
All right, that's good. And then the public hearing will be Tuesday, April 12th, because by that time we will have everything, all the information.
All right, so we'll tell Bay Path 7 o'clock on the 29th. and
Okay.
Maybe Spencer East Brookfield, 8 o'clock.
Okay,
I mean, usually an hour for Bay Path, is that too much?
45, we were scheduling like 40-minute blocks, but, I don't know.
Okay.
We can, I
Maybe
think,
tell
no,
them
tell
7,
Spen-
maybe tell them
yeah.
7:45. And then if there's 15 minutes that need to be killed, I'll do my budget update.
Okay, so, all right, so 7:40, I can email, Bay Path,
Yep.
because I've already been in contact, and
Okay.
you do Spencer East Brookfield, and, so you tell Spencer East Brookfield 7:45?
Yep.
And I'll tell Bay Path 7, and it's all good. All right, well, in the interest of the weather being less than hospitable tonight, unless anyone has anything else, motion, would anyone care to make a motion regarding adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Any second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Bill?